Hello everyone and welcome to my The Bold and Beautiful Always channel. Only two of the four individuals who traveled to Italy for work, the bold and the beautiful, returned alive. The day Eric Foreigner announced the Milan acquisition project, the lavish boardroom of Forrester Creations in Los Angeles, which is typically a hive of the electric tension of high fashion and higher stakes, felt like a mausoleum draped in silk. They handpicked four bright stars, the brilliant, analytical CFO Marcus Finch, who saw numbers as a living tapestry, the charismatic marketing director Chloe Hamilton, whose charm could sell ice to Eskimos and secure deals through sheer force of personality, the pragmatic, indispensable operations manager Eleanor Vance, who was the glue holding their chaotic brilliance together, and the fiercely ambitious head designer Antonio Rossi, whose Italian heritage burned with a passion to conquer his homeland. Their goal was to obtain the sole license rights to the fabled, almost mythical Velluto Rosso textile mill outside of Milan, which produces a fabric so beautiful that it has the potential to revolutionize haute couture. With the promise of unthinkable beauty and financial gain, it was the most audacious move Forrester had ever considered. Eric's booming voice echoed with paternal pride, Ridge nodded stoically, and Brooke smiled with encouraging optimism. However, Steffi, who was always observant, noticed the glimmer of discomfort in Antonio's eyes, a shadow that crossed his normally fiery confidence as he looked over his team, which they believed was headed for glory. Champagne-fueled festivities at Il Giardino marked the farewells, which were full of audacious declarations about capturing Europe and lovely dreams of Forrester's supremacy over the world. Hope gave Chloe a firm hug and wished her luck, Liam gave Marcus a pat on the back, and Wyatt made Eleanor swear to bring back real espresso. Unaware that the complex fabric of their life was about to come apart with cruel, irrevocable finality, they boarded the private aircraft, exuding the invincibility of youth and genius, and set out to create their masterpiece in the center of Italian luxury. The first several days in Milan were a blur of overwhelming pressure and enticing beauty. Their temporary headquarters, a stunning 16th-century mansion with a view of Lake Como, was awash in old-world luxury, complete with marble floors, frescoed ceilings, and terraces that smelled of jasmine in the Italian sun. At the Velluto Rosso mill, meetings were just as heated. The mill's owner, the mysterious and infamously challenging Signor Giovanni Lombardi, whose family had been keeping its secrets for centuries, was an expert negotiator. Antonio's impassioned arguments concerning heritage and design legacy were met with a noncommittal grunt. Chloe's brilliant presentations appeared to bounce off Lombardi's archaic, incomprehensible exterior, and Marcus's statistics and projections were met with stony silences. The only one who appeared to make any progress was Eleanor, who patiently navigated Lombardi's peculiarities and the intricate web of local laws with her quiet competence, careful planning, and unexpected proficiency in the local dialect. Relationships started to be distorted by the pressure cooker setting. Antonio, who was anxious to establish himself domestically, became more erratic and yelled at Marcus over trivial financial issues. His annoyance was evident. Perceiving Lombardi's admiration for Eleanor, Chloe began to spit out subtle, lovely jabs under the cover of compliments, her competitive nature becoming more icy. Marcus's analytical mind found it difficult to measure Lombardi's emotional commitment to his family's legacy when he dug deeper into the facts. Holding them together, mediating late-night disputes driven by pricey Barolo and gnawing fear, was a strain for Eleanor, the calm center. Their team's ugliness festered in sharp, even mocking contrast to the beauty of their surroundings, which included a calm lake, the majestic Alps, and exquisite architecture. There were murmurs. Was someone disclosing delicate negotiating strategies? Why did Lombardi appear to be aware of their internal compromises prior to their official proposal? Amid the grandeur of the Renaissance, a deadly, beautiful germ of paranoia took root. On a day that was frighteningly gorgeous and crystal clear, the first death came like a lightning bolt. The fabled Crimson Loom was housed in the mill's most secure area, which they had obtained a crucial concession from Lombardi, a private tour. The feeling of success was palpable. They celebrated by eating at a restaurant with a Michelin star that was situated high above the lake. The food was delicious, the scenery was stunning, and the atmosphere was cautiously upbeat. They went back to the villa late, a little drunk on relief and grappa, and went up the opulent marble staircase. Leading the way was Antonio, who was talking animatedly about a breakthrough moment he had had with Lombardi earlier that day. A heavy, old marble bust of some forgotten Medici, balanced precariously on a landing ledge near the top, swayed. It plunged before anyone could respond. Time slowed. Chloe let out a scream. Marcus made a pointless rush forward. Like a gunshot, the bust's horrible, wet crunch as it made contact with Antonio's head reverberated across the long hallway. His flaming ambition was extinguished in a hideous moment of random, savage violence, and he collapsed quickly, like a broken doll at the base of the stairs, with blood spilling darkly and obscenely on the immaculate white marble. The lovely villa turned into a scene out of a nightmare. The peaceful stillness of the lake was broken by distant sirens. Eleanor, pale and shaking but lucid, interpreted as local police examined the accident with incisive and suspicious inquiries in fast-paced Italian. Marcus's analytical mind was shattered as he stood still, gazing at the covered body. Chloe's lovely exterior gave way to unadulterated, animal sorrow as she sobbed uncontrollably. The official verdict was a loose bass, vibrations from their footfall, and a horrible accident. But the same question was raised by the unsaid, shared dread in their eyes, was it? From being merely a challenge, the shadow over Milan grew deeper and deeper. The veil of grief felt heavy and oppressive. Marcus turned into a ghost, haunting the library of the villa and constantly going over the financial records and security camera footage, which revealed nothing definitive, only a blur of movement close to the bust before it fell, in an attempt to find patterns, significance, or a perpetrator that his reasoning could understand. He grew to believe that the agreement was connected to Antonio's death, which was sabotage. He whispered about Lombardi's possible competitors, hidden accounts, and inconsistencies. Chloe's sorrow turned into a delicate, lovely numbness. She operated automatically, going to the required meetings with Lombardi, her eyes clouded, her charm replaced by a vacuous professionalism. In an attempt to find comfort, she clung to Eleanor, but since the accident, they had become oddly distant. The gloomy details were handled by Eleanor, who remained pragmatic despite her desperation. She coordinated with Forrester Creations back home, where shock and anguish echoed through the offices, communicated with Italian officials, and contacted Antonio's distraught family in Naples. Brooke was distraught, so Ridge booked a trip right away. The pressure to save the Velluto Rosso agreement grew in the middle of the sadness. Senior Lombardi made it apparent that the window of opportunity was closing while offering cliched condolences. Bound by trauma and responsibility, the remaining three continued to negotiate, now with a horrible undertone. Marcus implied corporate espionage connected to Antonio's death during a particularly heated session, accusing Lombardi of knowing more than he said. Enraged, Lombardi almost abruptly ended the conversation. Eleanor was the only one who managed to defuse the situation by speaking quickly and calmly in Italian and getting a final crucial meeting at the mill. Lombardi's offer of exclusive access to the Crimson Loom's produce was beautiful, but it was now permanently marred by blood. Their hearts thumping with terror as much as ambition, they were making their way back into the lion's lair. The final meeting took place in the huge, reverberating center hall of the mill, which was dominated by the fabled, elaborate Crimson Loom, a stunning, hideous contraption made of dazzling metal and polished wood. Centuries of history and secrets were illuminated as dust motes swirled in shafts of sunshine. Latent strength and unresolved tension buzzed through the air. Marcus's voice was tense as he proposed new, tougher terms, looking pale but determined. Lombardi shot back, his eyes icy. In an attempt to regain her ability to persuade, Chloe talked about legacy and global reach, but her voice lacked the conviction it usually possesses. Desperate to fill the gap, Eleanor translated in a controlled tone. It became a heated negotiation. Declaring their offer offensive, Lombardi stood up. Citing arcane financial trails he thought he had unearthed, Marcus yelled at him as he turned to leave, accusing him directly of planning Antonio's death to scare them away. There was anarchy. Lombardi yelled while making crazy gestures. Security personnel moved forward. Marcus tripped against a massive, freestanding industrial spindle rack that contained dozens of dazzling, razor-sharp bobbins of precious veluto rosso thread while he was backing away from an approaching guard in the midst of the intense turmoil. "Marcus, no!" Eleanor yelled a warning, but it was too late. There was a painful slowness in the rack. Lombardi halted, terror rising in place of his rage. Marcus was buried beneath a hideous avalanche of beauty and lethal weight as the rack fell with a horrible, metallic shriek. Like shrapnel, the pointed spindles punctured. As if in a ghastly veil, the red threads, instantly drenched with darker crimson, unfolded around him. The crash was followed by utter and deafening silence. With her eyes wide with instinctive fear, Chloe stood motionless, her hand clamped over her mouth. Eleanor retched and fell to her knees. Lombardi said "Madonna mia" repeatedly as he stared in shock. The hall had been transformed into a charnel house. Under the exact emblem of the beauty they had traveled across an ocean to acquire, Marcus Finch, the man who sought reason in chaos, was silenced forever. The aftermath was a haze of heartbreaking anguish and bureaucratic nightmare. Italian officials came down once more. The scrutiny was severe and oppressive this time. Hours were spent questioning Chloe and Eleanor separately, with a detached formality that verged on accusation. After meticulous reconstruction, the official conclusion was that it was yet another sad accident, a furious dispute, an unintentional slip in a busy industrial area. There were no charges brought. Visibly scared and confronted with his own possible liability nightmare, Lombardi silently accepted Forrester's initial offers in a bloodless win. The sum seemed unthinkable, yet the contract was secured. Chloe and Eleanor packed like robots back at the villa, cloaked and quiet. They were unable to look at one another. 2 accidents? The unanswered questions weighed more than the Italian humidity. Or something much darker? Was the loose bust known to anyone? Marcus, did he really trip? Did Lombardi play a role? Was there gloom among them, or what? The flight home was a tomb of silence and pressure. The gap between their chairs, which was caused by trauma and suspicion, could not be filled by words. Chloe's lovely face was permanently marked with a frightened shock as she gazed blankly at the clouds outside the window. Bound by the survivor's guilt and the dreadful ambiguity, Eleanor gripped a little, unopened bottle of Barolo Antonio had purchased, her knuckles white, her thoughts repeating every scene, every interaction, looking for clues she could have missed. They arrived at LAX as broken survivors rather than victorious victors. Forrester's private vehicle felt like a hearse. Just outside the sliding glass doors of the terminal, Steffi and Hope were waiting tensely. Before a word was uttered, the story was delivered by the sight of just 2 individuals coming out, pale and diminished, slowly making their way through the automatic doors into the intense Californian sunlight. Hope's optimistic grin vanished in an instant, to be replaced by a growing sense of horror. You could hear Steffi take a sharp inhale. Beautiful, horrible tragedy had been the end of the audacious ambition of Italian invasion. Only 2 made it out of Milan alive, but they brought with them not contracts and fabric samples, but an inexplicable burden of anguish, unsolved questions, and a shadow that would tarnish the Forrester Creations hallways for all time. The shadows they carried back extended far into the future, indicating that the drama was far from over, and the beauty they sought was inextricably linked to death. Before the car even arrived at the estate, the rumors would begin. Why them? What actually took place? Now, the lovely exterior of success concealed a horrifying emptiness. After receiving the message, Taylor broke down in tears and made the decision to end their relationship with Ridge. The screen of Ridge's phone was still illuminated with the message that had rocked her world as Taylor Hayes sat by herself in the gentle golden light of the Forrester guest house, her hands shaking. Her breath caught as her mind raced, unable to accept what she had just read, words intended for Brooke, words laced with remorse, need, and vows Ridge had made he would never make again. Nevertheless, they were there, piercing her breast like a dagger. Logan, I miss you. When I look at you, I still see everything I've ever wanted, even if I'm not sure what this is with Taylor anymore. A part of her wanted to think that something had gone wrong. A draft was never sent. An artifact of the past. However, that morning was when the timestamp was taken. Hours before he bid her farewell with that rehearsed, recognizable smile that she had started to trust again, hours before he declared his love for her. Everything felt like a lie now. She gingerly put down the phone, as if it might blow up if she didn't, and put her hands to her face while crying, deep, guttural screams that came from a place so deep within of her that she'd forgotten it was there. It went beyond simple treachery. It was humiliation. It was the harsh knowledge that Ridge would always turn to Brooke, regardless of how hard she battled, how much she forgave, or how many times she attempted to be the dependable, selfless woman he needed. For years, she had suppressed her pride and kept herself together for their kids and the family she believed they still had. However, the fact that she would never be Brooke had always been there, lingering like a ghost in the background of every moment spent together. Years of Ridge picking her and then not picking her were memories that swept over her like a torrent. When Brooke broke his heart, he ran to her, and when the fantasy came back, he ran back to Brooke. Desperately, Taylor had thought that this time was different. That the suffering they had both gone through, the treatment, the betrayals, the time apart, had made him more mature. That Ridge had at last realized the worth of her quiet power and the way she provided love without fuss or expectations. However, it seems that a man addicted to turmoil needed more than love. She wiped away her tears and got to her feet, trembling, her heart pounding in her chest as determination took the place of sadness. She had to go. She needed to preserve what remained of her sanity and dignity. Because if she stayed after reading that message, she would once more have to accept that she was his backup plan. That every kiss, every future plan, and every tender moment spent together in bed or under the moonlight had been borrowed time until Ridge eventually found himself drawn back into Brooke. Ridge had promised them a quick weekend break, so she headed toward the bedroom where her belongings were packed. A Napa vineyard. A romantic getaway. One more delusion. She started taking items out of the suitcase and carelessly cramming them into the tote. Like a terrible chorus, the message repeated over and over in her head. Not in Taylor, but I still see everything I ever wanted. Not in the lady who had reared his kids, supported him at his mother's passing, and shown him forgiveness more times than she could remember. However, in Brooke. Brooke, always. She was shocked when the door creaked behind her and turned to see Ridge standing there, grinning and flushed from the sun, until he noticed her look. Taylor, sensing that anything was amiss, he spoke slowly. What's happening? The tears had dried up and had been replaced by something colder as she gazed at him. Her voice was flat yet vulnerable as she said, I read your message. To Brooke. Ridge paled as he froze. Taylor said. No, she interrupted, holding up her hand. Don't elaborate. Just don't disrespect me with excuses, please. You meant what you said. He yelled out, I didn't send it. I was simply exhaling. Reflecting. I was perplexed. Taylor made a shrill, bitter laugh that wasn't appropriate for her often gentle manner. Were you perplexed? She said it again. That's your response? You're confused after everything we've been through, after I gave myself permission to trust in us once more? I spent my entire life waiting for you to get your head straight, Ridge. I persuaded myself for years that you would eventually see me if I simply loved you more, remained patient, and showed you more forgiveness. Not Brooke. Me. Ridge took a stride in her direction, his face etched with guilt. Yes, Taylor, I do see you. I cherish you. It was only a moment, what I said to Brooke. A moment of weakness and stupidity. But that moment is the truth, she continued, her voice shaking. And you were lying to me about everything you said. Silence fell. Stifling quiet, heavy. Ridge's eyes were moist as he gazed at her, regret written in the creases surrounding his mouth. I didn't intend to cause you any harm. Slowly nodding, Taylor blinked back the final tears she would let fall for him. However, you did. And I can no longer act as though it's all right. I cannot be the woman who silently awaits your next pick-me-up. She hurried past him and grabbed her purse, slinging it over her shoulder. Gently, he took hold of her wrist. Please, Taylor, don't go like this. She stopped and gave him one final look. Ridge, you already let me go. You simply lacked the guts to acknowledge it. Taylor then left the room, not as a victim but as a woman who had at last made the decision to put herself before a guy who would never be able to.